As to the politics, and of course cost of living, number one issue in the country, we are hot and heavy on this issue because the Prime Minister lied his way into office. He did so 3 years ago. He promised us, or gets ready to do so again at this upcoming election. A Labor government will lower the cost of living. That was the promise from opposition. The reality, of course, is something very different. The cost of living has become the major issue. We lead with it most nights because how can you not? Think of all of the things that other people want to talk about. 73% of people say the number one issue for them is cost of living. Then it's housing, which of course feeds back into cost of living. Then we're into healthcare. Crime is above the economy and even above climate change. But look how far climate change has fallen, meaning potentially reality might sweep away a few of those greens and teals. As for the amount of money that we are spending in our supermarkets, somebody has put a tally together of just how much cost of living has gotten worse under the bloke who promised to make it better. It's a strategic battle. The Telegraph today said the grocery bills have surged 30% during the Albanese's government's first term, levelling families $3,000 a year poorer. Now remember, this $3,000 is on top of the $1,500 that they took away from 10 million taxpayers, so see how the numbers start to rise. Experts say the relentless rise in the price of consumer staples has transformed what was once a routine task now into a strategic battle of what can I afford, what can we do without. Of course, none of this applies to the people who lied their way into power, because remember, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and all of the people climbing the Greasby poles as his ministers have got not one but 3 pay rises since the last election. They promised to make it better. The only people it got better for was them, including the bloke who's now on over $600,000. Well, once you start to put in mortgages into that, the number goes through the roof. In my view, rather than photos of candidates that you either always vote for or you've never heard of, every opposition party should be running a fact like this over and over again and localising it to every electorate in the country. Because if you have a Labor MP, they lied their way to get there. According to the Financial Review today, the typical family is now $19,000 poorer since Labor took power. This is why we talk about it every day. There aren't many families who 3 years ago would have told you, oh, we've got $19,000 under the couch, or we're just piddling up against the wall. Price rises, elevated mortgage rates, income tax bracket creep have combined to deliver the biggest fall in living standards on record. Repeat, biggest fall in living standards on record. What was their promise? They'll make everything better, as measured by real household disposable income per person. Financial Review, hardly some sort of hardcore right-wing outlet, goes on to say the biggest contributor to the erosion in household purchasing power is inflation, with the prices of goods and services consumed by the average household up 15% in the past 3 years. Real household disposable income down almost 8%. So everything costs more, but the power of your dollar to pay for things goes backwards. In dollar terms, it's a loss of $4,800 per person between the March quarter in 2022 and the December quarter in 2024. This is according to the Coalition and their economic analysis. But no one is arguing those numbers. Despite the promise of everything getting better, everything got worse. And when it comes to the staples you're buying, when it comes to the supermarket, that's about $3,000 backwards. And if you're trying to pay off a house, well, it is, of course, the best part of, $4,800 per person. This is why there is a giant hole, and do not let them get away with it. Do not let them get away with lying, making everything worse, and still hoping for your vote. This was the opposition today on this matter with Chris Kenny.
And this is Australians paying for a Labor government that simply can't manage its own budget, and we pay the price for it. There's an old saying that when left-wing governments run out of money, they come after yours, and that's exactly what we are seeing.
Apologies with Pete this morning. Now, let's also talk about the single greatest source of revenue for the Australian government, you and me, anyone who pays as they go, income tax. This federal government is getting more than any government has in a generation. In fact, it is a 19-year high. Again, the Financial Review are the ones banging out the stories on this, so they're going to get a good run with me because they are putting some numbers behind this. A think tank called the E61 Institute, a former productivity commissioner, says income tax is the workhorse of the Australian revenue-raising system. To give you an idea, where does this mob of liars and fools get their money from? Income tax, $293.7 billion, more than double the amount that they get out of company tax and multiples of the GST. Chris Richardson, who is with Access Economics, or Deloitte Access Economics, often a man you'll see in and around budget time, trying to push through the BS and tell you what the real numbers are. He says the tax receipts will hit 23.8% of GDP this financial year on a cash accounting basis. The outcome would represent the highest level of taxation revenue since the Howard government was in office in 2005-2006. Here he was when speaking to my colleague and friend, Ross, a little earlier today on Business Now.
Australia, its standards of living is going backwards at such a rapid rate compared with other countries because inflation, bracket creep, the amount of money that government has taken from PAYG taxpayers is increased incrementally. In other words, people's cost of living crisis largely is as a result of the government taking more money out of their pockets.
And that increase in the tax take has been part of it.
Ross Greenwood with the question, based off the stats again, I show you. The Australian Financial Review and their headline, done off, yes, the coalition's numbers, but $19,000 poorer. $19,000 poorer when it comes to households. Because paying off a house is more expensive, because buying in any of the supermarkets more expensive, because the government takes more than it has taken in a generation. And then it's what they decide to spend the money on. And we've got plenty to say about that tonight, because aren't they trying to change the subject on that one? There is no Jedi mind trick that will work here. No weak minds watching this program. Under this government, a football stadium of people have been hired by the public service. In fact, the size of government is worth mentioning. Again, Chris Richardson talking to Ross.
The size of government has risen in recent years. In 2022-23, the size of government spending was somewhere around 24% of national income. In the coming year, it will be somewhere around 27% of national income. And that's a pretty substantial shift in a short period of time.
So if you're following there, income coming in, more than that going out to pay for the public service. Why? Because the modern Labor Party has one view and one view only. They view electoral strength through a triangle of dependence, that you either have your hand out wanting welfare, or you work for the government, or if you're in private business, then the biggest client is the government. That triangle would be more than 60% of the Australian population. If they can get it to that nice sweet spot like they have in Victoria, like they did for a long time in Queensland, then it does not matter what they do. Remember, in Victoria, their O system resulted in the death of 33 people. Yet we keep being told health is such a high priority. That government got re-elected. The government that has bankrupted the state so much so that now it is getting a greater percentage of the GST pie than the population it has is because, of course, it's a Labor state and it's a place where Albo needs to hold on to seats in order to hold on to power. What these people are doing to our country is a disgrace. With your vote, with your preference, with your commitment to watching programs like this and spreading the facts, the information that I'm handing to you from multiple sources, and I show you the sources. I don't pretend that I found all of this in the middle of the night. I show you where it comes from. Well, this brings us to old grim Jim Chalmers. Now, he, of course, has told us that he's the greatest economic manager since sliced bread because for the past couple of years they've been running a budget surplus. Guess what's coming? A budget deficit. Exactly. This was announced today by the Treasurer, trying to get out in front of the budget that will be formally announced on the 25th, so that's not this week but next week. And by the way, that is the first of what is going to be 40, and I repeat 40, budget deficits in a row. Why do I know it's 40 years? Because Jim Chalmers also released a document called the Intergenerational Report, how Australia stacks up financially and socially for the next few decades. And despite the fact that we will have the best part of 40 million people living here over the next little while, the government will still keep spending like drunken sailors because what is baked into the budget only gets more rotten as the years roll on. In fact, have a look. I circled it for you in the red. Every budget year between now and 2063, anything below the line, deficit. this year, next year, year after 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 year after, and they want you to vote for them? They have more money than ever before, but they are spending more than ever before. They have designed a budget to spend even more when you and I may be long gone, or it'll be our kids and grandkids that'll be paying for it. Unbelievable, right? And they have the stones to say they are the great economic managers. They took $1,500 off 10 million workers as an automatic tax return. One of the first things they did. They turned around and used every opportunity to put up every price they possibly could when it came to the little taxes, fuel and smokes and booze along the way. These are the people who say cost of living's absolutely front and centre in everything we have to do. Reality is too little too late tax cuts were $14 a week.